Hello, everybody. This is Mike Miller, and welcome back to the Go Carolinas podcast. Today, we're very lucky to have Kirsten McDonald with us. Kirsten is the Information and Educational Supervisor for DuPont State Forest in North Carolina, which, if you're familiar with DuPont, it's about 15 miles west of Hendersonville. If you're not, it's still about 15 miles west of Hendersonville. Kirsten, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
For those who know me or don't know me, I've been going to DuPont off and on a pretty regular basis almost since the day the place opened, and it's one of my favorite places to visit, to hike and mountain bike and so forth. And so hopefully we can learn a little more about the place from Kirsten. I know it has a very interesting origin story, and she can tell us about the trails and lakes and waterfalls and all the wonderful places to visit there. So Kirsten, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you ended up at DuPont.
Oh, I'm a COVID transfer. How about that? So I've had a varied career. I had a career in public relations and marketing, including being the director of marketing of a hospital, working for an ad agency, and having my own public relations and marketing business. And then I also had a second career as an elementary school librarian. I'm also a children's book author.
Oh, cool.
And when I was on leave during COVID, during the school year for COVID, I was looking at opportunities that might be a little more COVID safe than an elementary school, and saw this opportunity with DuPont State Recreational Forest. And it's just a great combination of my background in public relations and marketing and my background in education. So I applied for it, and here I am.
Excellent. Now, are you from, were you living in Western North Carolina already?
I was working in an elementary school in Asheville, North Carolina.
Remind me when DuPont actually opened. I know it's been, what is it, 20 years now or a little more?
Okay. Yeah, it's been a while. Let me pull up some data so that I can get the exact date for you. As with many public lands, the land itself, the forest has grown on and off over the years. DuPont State Recreational Forest originally opened as DuPont State Forest in 1996. And at that point, the forest was only, let's see, a little more than 7,500 acres. We're now almost 13,000 acres. So it was substantially smaller when it originally opened. And at that time, it did not include several of the waterfalls.
Okay. And you want to tell us the story of how the land ended up being transferred from the actual DuPont company to the state and everything? I know that's a pretty interesting story.
So yeah, the DuPont never actually transferred the land to the state. Let's see. In 1996 and in 97, DuPont sold its industrial operations and the surrounding land holdings. The 2,700 acres that surrounded the industrial facility were sold to Sterling Diagnostic Imaging in 1996, and the Conservation Fund purchased the other land and then deeded that over to the state. So the state ended up buying that from the Conservation Fund for about $2.2 million. And local conservation groups were really instrumental in bringing everybody together and helping to have set aside funding from the state, from the North Carolina Natural Heritage Trust Fund. And there's about almost 2,000 acres within the property that's registered as having ecological significance. So it's registered within the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program.
Okay. Do you know how long the DuPont Corporation actually owned that land prior to all this happening?
Yeah, DuPont was here, let's see, 1956 to 1997. So in 1956, DuPont purchased about 10,000 acres from Frank Cox, the Frank Cox estate. And so that was both what was the Buck Forest Club and the Alex Guyon Farm in Henderson County to build their manufacturing facility here. And that plant opened in 1958.
Okay. And so obviously they had way more land than they needed for the facility. Did they use the land as just a recreational land for their own employees during that time, or what was the land used for? I know a lot of those trails were already there when you guys first opened.
Yeah, they definitely used it for their employees. They had a lot of things that they would do with their employees, you know, employee-wide fish fries and softball games and picnics, cookouts. And then, of course, they would bring in other corporate leaders from within DuPont or their partners to come here for I guess, a mountain retreat, you would call it. So they would come here and use the property for that. They had the trails that the majority of the trails that we have were inherited from the time when DuPont was here.
Okay, so that's pretty nice to get a piece of land that already has a whole bunch of trails built on it.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's nice to have the trails already here, but unfortunately, they put trails where they wanted them. They're driving vehicles on them and not really thinking about necessarily sustainability of those trails or multiple use. And now here at DuPont State Recreational Forest, our trails are used by hikers, bikers, horseback riders, dog walkers, families, which is a very different use than what DuPont had designed them for. And our visitation for the past year was about 1.2 million people.
Oh, wow.
And DuPont never, when they built their trails as an industrial labor, never intended for there to be that many visitors on the trail. So there are a number of places where we are going in and reworking trails so that they can be more sustainable over time, and just to enhance the general visitor experience. After that transfer to the conservation fund, there was 2,200 acres that includes the waterfall tract of High Falls, Triple Falls, and Bridal Veil Falls. And when that parcel came up for sale from the DuPont Corporation, the state was outbid by a developer named Jim Anthony. And Anthony went in, he built the covered bridge that we have here. That's not a historical relic other than it being from the, you know, the late 1999 or so was when he built that as a way to cross the little river. And he also put together the building, the log cabin that's now serves as our visitor center, and was intending to use that as a sales office. So he had built these structures. He intended to portion off the land into residential lots, and some of those lots would have some beautiful views of places like High Falls. And the Friends of the Falls got together. It was a group of people who felt that this really needed to be protected for future citizens of North Carolina and not made into a private residential area. So through their advocacy and through the intervention of politicians, the state of North Carolina did go in and exercise the right of eminent domain to take over that 2,200 acres. But they also paid Jim Anthony for it. So they didn't just simply take it. And in fact, they paid him more than he paid for the property.
Okay, so obviously when they first opened as a park, there were not a lot of facilities there other than maybe a couple of parking lots and the existing trail system. What was the process of developing it more into a visitor friendly kind of area?
So there were all the trails that were inherited. The covered bridge was there, which provided safe passage across the river. And just over the years, we've added amenities like bathrooms. There were no bathrooms when the forest first opened as a state forest.
I know.
So I'll bet you do. We have a new one under construction right now over at Guyon Farm.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool.
So, you know, just working to add those sorts of amenities to enhance the visitor's experience, building the pedestrian bridge across the little river, because as you probably remember, Mike, you would come to DuPont, you'd park down at the Hooker Falls parking lot, and then you would walk on Staten Road and cross over the guardrail to get down to go along the trail up to Triple Falls. Well, there's now a pedestrian bridge so that passage can be a lot safer. And I do want to back up though and address one thing. You do what everybody else does, and you call us a park, and we're not a park.
Pardon me.
We're not a park. And when I explain that to people, they're like, well, what's the difference? And just the simple way I remember it is park begins with P and people begins with P. So parks are focused on people, and a forest has the letter T in it. So a forest is about the trees. And here at DuPont State Recreational Forest, we're kind of a hybrid between the two. And that's how we're the only recreational forest in North Carolina. And that gives us a lot more of a focus on people than a regular state forest might have.
Okay, so there's not any logging or anything going on in the forest, right?
Well, we do have timber harvests that go on as part of the forest management program. Right now, there's a timber harvest going on over near Guyon Farm. When DuPont Corporation took over and had that farmland known as Guyon Farm area, they decided they would use that as a white pine plantation. And so they cleared anything that was left. And a lot of it was at that point open pasture land from the farm. And they planted white pines everywhere. And anyone who knows about forests knows that when you have only one type of tree in a forest, it's not a very healthy forest. It doesn't provide much in terms of habitat for wildlife. So what we're doing is going in and thinning out the white pines so that oaks can regenerate in that area, so that we can return the forest to a mix of woods, a mix of tree types in that area. So different wood types, so it's not all white pines. A lot of the white pines in that area are also getting to the end of their life. People frequently don't know that trees have a lifespan, and they do. So a lot of those white pines are going to start dying. So at this point, to harvest them in an environmentally conscientious way so that we can enrich the forest by increasing diversity, and then also have the state benefit from those trees being used for timber while they're still live trees before they reach the end of their lifespan. So yes, there is timber activity going on here in the forest.
Okay, I did not realize that. Now you mentioned earlier that you had over 1 million visitors in 1 year last year?
Yeah, and that was down a little bit from the year before, where it was 1.3 million visitors.
Wow. I know it's the rate of growth has been phenomenal. How many visitors were you getting when you first opened the first few years?
Let me see if I can pull that up for you. I'm looking back through an old annual report. I can go back to 2012. That's what I can easily put my finger on, where it was 300,000.
Yeah. So just
300,000. Yeah. Here's something interesting just to think about, Mike. If you take the number of acres that you have at Great Smokies National Forest, which is the most visited national forest or national park in the US, and divide that into the number of acres that are included in the park, they have 26.8 visitors per acre per year. 26.8 visitors per acre per year. DuPont has 104 visitors per acre per year. We have a lot of people coming here.
Oh, believe me, I know all about that. In fact, crowd management I guess, is one of your biggest challenges up there. I know, up to just a few years ago, people would park, for a half mile up and down the road on both sides there at Hooker Falls on the weekends. And it just kind of got ridiculous. I noticed that recently you've closed all that off where people can't park on the road and tried to expand some parking areas.
Let me talk just a little bit about that roadside.
Okay.
Those wooden posts. During COVID, of course, and at the very start of COVID-19 pandemic, public lands closed, Pisgah closed, couldn't enter the forest, DuPont closed, couldn't enter the forest. Then we realized, oh, being outside is the thing to do. But we wanted to spread visitors out. So we initially had put up some green metal T stakes along the road there to keep people from parking. And what we found is our numbers, the T stakes eliminating that roadside parking did not change the number of visitors that we had, but it did spread them out to other areas and throughout different time frames. So our visitation continued to increase even with that roadside parking eliminated. And what we also found is that safety increased. So we have since gone back and pulled out the green metal T stakes and replaced them with much more attractive wooden posts to exclude people from parking there on the side of Staten Road. People don't realize it, but the speed limit there is 55 and 45 miles per hour. And when they're trying to walk down the road with their little kids, I mean, it's just not safe. So this provides a little bit more of a barrier between the people that are walking, say, from the Lake Imogene parking area along Staten Road down to Hooker Falls parking area, as well as protecting then the car traffic.
Is there any discussion ever been made about trying to widen that road a little bit through there just to make it a little bit safer?
I have no idea. That's more of that's a DOT issue. That's not something we would have control over.
Okay. All right. I know, I don't even like riding my bike through that area because it gets so many cars going by.
Well, it does. And the other thing too, when you're riding your bike and the cars were parked along the side of the road, they could easily open their door up right in front of you, and you wouldn't have time to brake, and or swerve out of the way. Your option would be to crash into their car door or to swerve into oncoming traffic potentially. I mean, it was just a mess. So it was definitely a safety hazard, and it is much improved.
Okay. So we've talked about a few things. I guess the one thing we haven't talked about is the actual beauty of the park and what people can see when they come to visit there. I know it's well known for the waterfalls and hiking trails and so forth. Why don't you just tell us about some of the more popular areas of the park and what people, if they're not familiar with it, what they should go to see?
So if you've never been to DuPont State Recreational Forest, of course you want to come here and visit the waterfalls. The most spectacular waterfalls are High Falls, which is a 125-foot drop, definitely a cascade. And then comes Triple Falls, which is a series of 3 falls, which together is about 125 feet. And those are easily accessible on what for the mountains is a relatively flat trail to get in and out to see those. And even if you aren't up for a big hike, you can walk from the visitor center to the High Falls picnic shelter. And from the picnic shelter, you can have a view of High Falls. And that, to walk there, I would really say for the mountains, that is flat. Less than, or about a 1 mile round trip to get to High Falls shelter and back. So that's a very easy thing. For people that want to, and then there's Hooker Falls, which you would park at the Hooker Falls parking lot. And it's about a 1/3 of a mile hike in and then back out, just a single trail in and out. That trail used to follow along the river and was creating lots of erosion and really being a detriment to the health of the water and the animals that live there. So we've since rerouted that, and it's a beautiful trail through the woods to Hooker Falls, which was named for the Hooker family that operated a grist mill there. The Hooker Falls is about a 12-foot cascade, so it's not as big as High Falls and Triple Falls, but it does have a nice swimming hole at the base of it. So people often come in and enjoy that area, and it's a short hike in from the parking lot. 2 other falls that people might want to be aware of are Bridal Veil Falls, which is a little bit more of an ambitious hike or bike in, and that's more of a sort of a sliding, like sliding rock kind of waterfall. You can't slide on it. There is no basin at the bottom like Sliding Rock has, but it is that more of the, instead of the water just falling off the edge, it's coming down in sheets over the rock. Grassy Creek Falls is similar to that. And I think the real hidden gem here at DuPont is Wintergreen Falls, which is accessed from the Guyon Farm parking area. It's about a 3-mile round trip hike. It's not a very strenuous hike in to see Wintergreen Falls, but it's just a beautiful little falls, 12-foot with a nice pool at the base. It's often not very crowded, even in the middle of the summer. So that's a nice secret spot people can go to. Oh, so that's the waterfalls. We also have, let's see, 40 miles of multi-use roads. Those would be gravel roads. The Forest Service has vehicles that may be going on those roads for various Forest Service activities, but they're great for riding a bike on, walking, jogging on. And then we have 60 miles of multi-use trail. We have just a few trails like the Hooker Falls Trail and the Triple Falls Trail that are exclusively for foot traffic. Everything else is open up to all users at this time. Something else people don't know about is that we've got some great lakes here. We've got Lake Imogene, we've got Fawn Lake, we've got Lake Dents, Lake Alfred, and Lake Julia. Lake Julia is the largest of those lakes at 100 acres. You can swim in Lake Julia. If you want to cart your kayak or canoe in, you can boat around on the lake or bring your inflatable stand-up paddleboard and enjoy that here. You can go fishing in the lakes. So the lakes are great. That's one of my favorite things to do here is to swim in Lake Julia.
Yeah, I've got a buddy who's been known to put his kayak on a cart behind his mountain bike and ride it over to Lake Julia, do a little paddling around there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we do have areas that are we are designated game lands, so we do have hunting and fishing here at DuPont State Recreational Forest, and that's a difference too with the park. Most parks do not allow hunting. The waterfall corridor is a hunting safe zone, so hunters are not allowed there. So visitors that come do not need to worry about hunting. Hunting here is you have to have both the North Carolina permit and you have to have so you have your North Carolina license, and then you also have to have a permit for hunting here at DuPont. And all of those are controlled by the North Carolina Wildlife Commission. So it's not something that DuPont handles. The same with fishing. We don't issue fishing licenses. That's the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. Okay.
Let's see. One observation I would make is that it's what, 8,000 acres or 10,000 acres, but I would say 80% of the people never get more than about a mile or two from the parking lot. Is that about
That's true?
That's accurate
true.
there?
I would say of our 1.2 million visitors, 700,000, all they ever do is something, either Hooker Falls, High Falls, Triple Falls loop. That's all they do.
Okay. Do you have any idea of the count of visitors, but like hikers versus bike riders versus equestrians?
I don't really have that. And it's kind of funny because if you were to ask me as a user here, I get on my mountain bike at Guyon Farm and I bike to Lake Julia, but along the way I have to hike because it's too steep for me to pedal all the way up. So am I hiking or am I biking or am I swimming? Because I'm going to end up, my purpose is to get to Lake Julia to go for a swim. And I don't think I'm unique in that of people coming here to do more than one thing. But I don't have, any sort of breakdown. If we just look in generalities, we're going to have to say that the hikers are the largest user group because that's the group that's coming and only doing that waterfall corridor, the 1.5 mile hike or less than a mile hike into Hooker Falls and back.
Okay, yeah, I know even on days when it looks really crowded in the parking lot, once you get out in the woods, it's not. You can
Absolutely.
have the woods to yourself.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Let's talk about some improvements that are going on here at the forest. So last summer, we put in a new dock at Lake Dents, and a lot of people have been enjoying that. So it is just a great way to get out to a little bit further from the shore for taking a nice swim. We've been doing a lot of trail renovation here at DuPont. Most this past week, we've been working on the High Falls Loop and replacing fencing there for visitor safety, and just working on the surface there to make it a better surface, more sustainable surface, working on draining water off. And over at Guyon Farm, our parking lot there is currently closed because we have that parking lot being enlarged. And in addition to that, we have a bathroom with flushing toilets and running water for washing your hands and filling your water bottles is going in over there at the Guyon Farm area.
I know a lot of people, myself included, will be happy to see that.
A lot of people will be. Indeed.
Okay. Yeah, I know recently you did a 2 or 3 years ago, they did a nice improvement in the parking lot there at the visitor center by looping it up the hill, making it a one-way road there. That's been a nice improvement.
Right. And we are planning to open an overflow parking area late this spring, just up the hill from the visitor center. And that we're hoping that area will take some of the pressure off the High Falls parking lot. So that overflow parking area will be right near what was Lake Dira, the DuPont Employee Recreation Area. It's closed off now. It's still part of the industrial area that is not open to the public, but it's right there beside Staten Road.
Okay. Yeah, that's one thing I meant to ask you about. I guess they have what they call the DuPont donut hole there.
The donut hole.
Which is kind of a no-go area right in the middle of the park.
It is.
And what's the status of that? Are they is it just being inspected for like environmental reasons?
So the donut hole was where DuPont had its industrial sites. We still have large areas of pavement where they had their industrial facilities, but the facilities themselves have been torn down and the rubble removed. What we're currently working with are the dumps, I guess you'd call them, when DuPont was here and Sterling and Agfa, later owners of the property. As part of the manufacturing process, waste products, they dug a big dump and dumped things in there. And some of that we now know, they didn't know at the time, but we now know is hazardous chemicals. So what we're doing is remediating the land and remediating and monitoring those disposal areas. And I think once that area is deemed safe, then we can evaluate having the public use that area.
Okay, yeah, I know back in the day when we used to first ride up there, you could actually go all the way up Bridal Veil Falls and walk behind the falls, and then go out the other side over onto the Slick Rock trails, and that was before they closed it off. In fact, they used to have a big mountain bike event there in the fall every year that took you right through that course. So
a lot of what if something's closed off here, whether it's a trail or an area like the donut hole, or a bathroom building that might be closed, a parking lot, it's for visitor protection. It's to keep people safe and to allow work that's going on there to continue in an effective manner.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of space that is open, so there's really no reason to go in parts that aren't.
Right. Right, but Guyon Farm is nice, and right now, it's closed, and that's a spot that a lot of mountain bikers and equestrians tend to congregate at. So they're having to make do with Cornmill Shoals, Fawn Lake Access Area, Lake Imaging, but they know it's temporary, and then once we reopen, it's going to be better than it was, and so it's going to be worth the wait.
Okay. 60 miles of trail, that's a lot of work to keep those trails maintained. Is there like one person there that's kind of in charge of that and who schedules the maintenance and
Well, we've got
contract?
60 miles of trails and 40 miles of those gravel roads. And a lot of people come here and all they use are the gravel roads. But to specifically to your question, here at DuPont, we have a variety of branches, work branches that do a lot of collaboration. So for instance, right now on the High Falls Loop, the project there is being headed up by our recreation department, which includes two full-time employees and then an employee that he's a temporary employee and part of his time goes there and part of his time goes to maintenance. But then maintenance is also hopped in to help out on that trail. So recreation department itself, it has the expertise to evaluate a trail, to determine if it's something we can fix in-house, to determine if it's something that we might need to have an outside contractor come in and help us with, and then putting together a plan of how we're going to assess those needs or how we're going to address the needs that they've determined through the assessment.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a lot of great additions to the trail system over the years, and also some that have been like Reason Over Creek Trail. I'm thinking about when it used to be, what's the right word? When you came across the creek, it used to go on a different route than it does now. There was a very steep climb, and they rerouted that and made it a lot easier to get up that thing. That's all.
Well, actually, the reroute wasn't to make it easier for you to get up that thing.
Okay.
And that's sometimes a misconception is that, oh, you're making the trail easier. And actually what we're doing, we're not making it easier in terms of the visitor experience. What we're doing is making it easier to maintain and sustain, making it easier for water to drain off the trail without causing erosion. That's the ease that we're trying to create there. So that's what a reroute would be about. The other thing too that we're doing, when you look at the map that has a long list of trails over on the right-hand side, and that trail list is getting a little bit shorter, and people are like, oh, you've gotten rid of trails. And actually what we've done is we've combined some of these little short trails that are less than a half mile in length, slightly realign them so that they can become one trail. So Ruffed Grouse Trail is a new trail that we have here, but in fact, it is comprised of some small trails that have now been all pieced together into a single trail.
Okay, where is that one?
Ruffed Grouse is over near Guyon Farm,
Okay.
off of Hickory Mountain Road.
Okay. I should know them all by now, but I
Well,
guess
that's a new name for you, and
okay.
It's combines part of like the White Pine Loop and
Okay.
White Pine Trail.
Yeah, the one as far as a rider, the one nice thing about DuPont is you can take the very beginning level mountain biker up there, and then there's something that they can enjoy between the gravel roads and some of the double track and easier stuff, and then also some very challenging stuff that old guys like me might get off and walk occasionally. Most of my friends will ride it, but I've been known to walk a few spots.
Yeah, Mike, I refer to myself as a member of the Slow Spokes mountain biking club, and we go as slow as we want downhill and as slow as we want uphill. And getting off and walking, there's no need to feel bad about that. You're out enjoying being outside, you're getting exercise, and it's good to know, hey, this is not within my wheelhouse. I'm going to just walk this one. Yeah. It's okay.
I had to get hauled out of there in an ambulance one time. So,
yikes.
Yeah, I was on Reason Over Creek, and I don't even know what I did. It was not a technical spot in the trail, but the next thing I knew, I was over the bars and broke my shoulder, and
it can happen.
Ended up in an ambulance before too long.
That's why they're called accidents. I mean, they just happen, and sometimes it happens, you're perfectly in control, the trail's within your ability, but you hit something wrong, hit a rock wrong, hit a stick wrong, and you're over.
Well, Kirsten, thanks so much for taking time. Was there anything that we haven't covered that you would like people to know about visiting DuPont?
Absolutely. So we talked about what there is here to come and see and do, and we've talked about parking, and the biggest challenge here is parking. If you want to come to DuPont, come early in the morning, and early means before 9 o'clock, or come late in the afternoon. That means in the summertime, probably after 4 o'clock. So in the summer, get here before 9 or after 4, you'll still have plenty of daylight to enjoy the forest. If you're local, try not to come on a summer weekend, especially not Labor Day, Memorial Day, or 4th of July. And if you are going to come on one of those weekend days, I'd get here by 8 o'clock or come at 5 p.m. There's lots you can do late in the day, but you've got to find a place to put that vehicle.
Yeah. So I guess that raises the question. I guess I was trying to close out, but that brings up the question: has there ever been discussion of allocating visitor spots by like having to pre-register or some sort of lottery or anything along those lines, restricting the number of daily visitors?
We really have not talked about a way to restrict the number of daily visitors, and it's great to have people, not just locals, but people from throughout North Carolina, throughout the United States, and international visitors as well, be able to enjoy the forest. But you do need to plan your trip and come at a time where you can find some parking, and be aware too that we don't have a snack bar here. We don't have vending machines here. In fact, we don't have trash cans around because the bears would come to the trash cans and have a lovely picnic themselves. So come here prepared for a rustic experience. Bring your food, bring your water, take your trash with you. In the summer, you'll want a raincoat because we are in Transylvania County in part. And yeah, come on out, have a good time.
All right. Well, thanks again, Kirsten. I certainly appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And I hope people will learn a little bit from this and get up and see the forest, not the park.
Correct.
All
Love
right.
to have you guys come see DuPont State Recreational Forest.